In this teaching module, we're going to look at Keynesian versus Hayekian ideal types. So John Maynard Keynes and Frederick Hayek are two of the most respected and well-known economists through of the 20th century through today. Hayek and Keynes were actually friends in London during the Blitzkrieg and used to stand guard on Her Majesty's Treasury looking for German bombers. But they oppose each other philosophically and in their views on the state and society. And so what I've created is Hayekian versus Keynesian ideal types to understand these juxtaposed and opposing views in society, especially related to economics. So Keynes is well known for creating macroeconomics in the 1930s, which was then built upon by his followers after that. And today, Keynesian economics is part of government policy. For example, the largest fiscal expenditures and monetary expansion we've ever had in the United States occurred in the last few months during the COVID. So the immediate reaction to locking down the economy was to use fiscal and monetary expansion. Keynesian reaction, state reaction to the crisis is to use the state. So let's unpack what the Keynesian ideal type is. So this is the Keynesian equation where national income or GDP per year is private consumption expenditures, government spending, private investment, and exports minus imports. So these aggregated categories over a given year give us gross domestic product over a given year. So for Keynesians, if you can increase any of these categories, government spending using fiscal policy or investment using monetary policy, then national income goes up. But for Hayekians, government as a percentage of the economy is a burden. Government doesn't create wealth, it only redistributes wealth. So therefore, government gets in the way of wealth creation. So for Keynesians, the Keynesian ideal type, the ideal economy is a managed or planned economy where you have experts using fiscal and monetary policy to fine-tune the economy. And so the ideal behind Keynesian economics is to create stability where the state has a paternalistic role in job creation. That's the Keynesian ideal type. But the Hayekian ideal type is completely juxtaposed to that, where government spending, fiscal policy, is actually a burden. And we should also note that regulation is part of Keynesian economics, which is also government. Regulation creates the government burden. So a good way to look at these juxtaposing views is the 1930s. Why did the Great Depression last so long? And if you're a Keynesian, it's because the government wasn't doing enough for GDP. If you're a Hayekian, it's because the government was doing too much, creating a changing rule of law. That's called, Robert Higgs calls that regime uncertainty. So I'm a Hayekian, and my period of history for my dissertation was the 1930s, and I used this Higgs book quite a bit, where he shows how the ever-changing rule of law under the New Deal experiments prevented private investment. And it was the first time in American history that you had a decade of negative net private investment due to the regime uncertainty caused by the government burden intervention into the economy. Again, it depends if you're a Keynesian or a Hayekian and how those values are formed and why. We won't get into that. I'm just showing you the philosophical differences between the two. So again, for Keynesians, you have experts who can plan the economy and steer the economy and regulate the economy. The idea is stability, state paternalistic job creation. For Hayekians, it's the individual, not the expert. The individual acting in a decentralized way with other individuals creates emerged properties and spontaneous order in society. And when we look at historical growth, economic growth in historical perspective, we'll look at government burden measure over time and see how government has proved a burden, but we'll look at that historically, and has negative results on economic growth. And economic growth is what gives you a reduction in absolute poverty. So for Hayekians, individuals acting mutually voluntary in the market with others, creating value, brings economic growth and reduction in absolute poverty. And this type of individualistic approach, this emerged spontaneous order, brings self-determination as opposed to state paternalism, right? So under 80 years of the welfare state, we've created a big structure of state paternalism where the state is seen in charge of our self-determination, not individuals. And an example of what is seen and what is unseen under this state paternalistic job creation is corporate cronyism. How certain corporations get tax benefits and tax breaks and subsidies to locate certain places so that the state can claim they've created jobs. But what you don't see is everyone else has to pay the additional taxes for those special corporations and firms who get the special corporate cronyist tax breaks under the guise of Keynesian economics and stability and state paternalism and job creation. So you'll see there's a big philosophical difference between Keynesian and Hayekian's views on the economy. And it should be stated that by far, there's 20,000 members of the American Economic Association, and 90% are Keynesian economists, which is why you've had 80 years of the welfare state. And just a few, 5 or 10% are actual classical liberals or Hayekians. So that completes this teaching module on Keynesian versus Hayekian ideal types. Thank you.